Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our March 2nd North Middlesex Council meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call. Everyone is present. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. If you have any, please let Ashley know. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any errors or business arising? Approved. Approved by Councillor Moyer, seconded by Councillor McClinchy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We do at this time need a motion to go that regular meeting adjourn and proceed into public meeting, including Committee of Adjustment. Councillor Nickel, Councillor Keogh, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. So at 6 o'clock, we do have our first planning application is notice of public meeting to consider application B02-2022 and ZBA-3-2022 located at 153 to 159 Ann Street. And I think Jim, come on up if you'd like. How are you this evening? Good. Yeah, you're just social distance, so that's. Can you hear me? Okay, I think we're ready. So at this time, I would ask Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you for your report.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen with you. All right. So the purpose and effect of the application is to create a residential lot located at the corner of Ann Street and Leonard Ave in the urban settlement area of Park Hill. It is shown on your screen in front of you. The severed lot is highlighted in green and is known municipally as 153 Ann Street. It does contain a single detached dwelling. It is connected to a municipal water and sanitary connection, and an existing access will need to be established as part of a condition of the consent application. Whoa, my light just dropped. That was the loud banging noise. And the yellow highlighted area on your screen in front of you is the lands to be retained, and it contains the church, the office, a hall, and is used for generally church services and other parish events. And this building and structure also has a connection to municipal water and sanitary services. And the applicants did submit a zoning bylaw amendment application concurrently, which proposes to rezone the severed parcel from the institutional zone to the residential first density zone, and that's in order to recognize the residential use. The provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and the North Middlesex official plan generally permit lot creation in settlement areas subject to servicing and land use compatibility. Staff note that there's no proposed change of use for the lands at this point in time. The church building will remain, and the single detached dwelling is intended for residential uses. Confirmation of water and sanitary services being wholly contained on the severed and retained lots will be required as a condition of the consent application. As mentioned, an independent access off Ann Street for the lands to be retained will need to either be established or an easement be applied for over the adjacent lands. I'm unsure if you can see my cursor here, but the existing driveway actually appears to cross over private ownership onto the municipal right-of-way. So the applicant is aware, and there is a choice in regards to extending or applying for an access permit off of Ann Street or establishing a legal easement over top of the abutting lands. Staff have reviewed the sketch provided by the applicant and are of the opinion that the zoning requirements and the minimum standards are being met for both the severed and the retained parcels. Notice of the application has been circulated in accordance to the requirements of the Planning Act, and staff received the following comments. Asaba Bayfield Conservation Authority stated that the property does not fall in within the regulated limit. Bell Canada has no concerns. The North Middlesex Public Works Department did note that both the subject lands are connected to municipal water drinking system. Any additional connections would be subject to dues and levies at the time of a new connection. In regards to roads, staff did require that the owner dedicate lands up to 20 meters from the retained parcel along the westerly boundary limit or lot line for the purposes of future road construction and connectivity pertaining to Albert Street and Park Hill, to the municipality of North Middlesex for the purposes of road widening and dedication. So I can scroll up here for you to see. So the extension of Albert Street is being requested along the westerly side of the retained parcel. In regards to drainage, there is insufficient stormwater outlet fronting the retained or severed properties. Stormwater controls and flows are subject to municipal staff's approval at the engineering stage of this application. The severed lands have a publicly owned and operated sewage system. Access to the retained lot is from Ann Street. In regards to additional comments provided from Public Works, the owner has to provide catch and lieu and parkland dedication in accordance with the municipality's fee bylaw, which is $1,200 for the severed lot. The owner is to provide a lot grading and servicing drawing to the satisfaction of the municipality, as well as a design brief. The North Middlesex Chief Building Official has no objection to the application. And at the time of writing the subject report, no comments from the public have been received. So it is recommended that the consent application be granted subject to the conditions which council will have before them. And further, that the zoning bylaw amendment application be approved in principle, limited to first and second reading until such a time that the registered plan has been completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. At this time, I'd welcome the applicant for your comments.
Well, I'm a little hard hearing here and I can't hear it this one. That was hard for me to follow along. Just maybe it was the pitch of it, but that's okay. I'll get a list of these conditions. Will we get that sent to us just so I can?
Through your worship to the applicant, yes, you'll be getting a set or a list of the conditions to be fulfilled in terms of your consent application.
Okay.
And you'll have 2 years to fulfill that process.
2 years, nice. I missed the condition that was just before they started talking about the driveway. Do you remember what that one was? I think it was the first one you said, Stephanie. What was that one about?
Through the mayor to the applicant, I believe it was in regards to confirmation that the servicing is wholly contained on either of the properties. So that'll be a requirement that we'll have to demonstrate through, again, the conditions, which will be circulated when the clerk sends out the notice of decision.
Okay. When I was talking to Dave Savell from the diocese, he mentioned today to me, he says, well, we're gonna have to move the driveway. And I said, well, I think I don't know if I was talking to you, Stephanie, it was quite a few months ago, where they said about the part in the corner that is part of the school property, that they might be able to just get a letter or whatnot from them saying that we're allowed to use that as access, or are we going to have to move that driveway 100%?
Through the mayor to.
Was Arnie going to answer that? I think, Stephanie, go ahead, Stephanie.
Sure, through the mayor to the applicant. So staff have worded the condition in regards to access to include some flexibility. So either an easement has to be applied for, a legal easement, over top of the existing portion of the driveway that is located on the abutting owner's property, or there is an option as well to extend the current driveway so that there is legal access off of Ann Street directly to the severed parcel.
Okay. And as far as getting the easement, is that done through you, yes or no, or you and the school board? Just because the cable box there, the telephone box that's there, that driveway would have to be swerved right in front of the house if we did do that. Because I don't think there's enough room between, unless we take that big tree down.
Through your worship to the applicant, it would be up to your discretion to choose which option. An easement would require that you seek, it could be part of your survey activity, which you haven't done the survey, and that it's conditioned upon this application. But you'd also have to have it registered on title, and you'd have to demonstrate that to us. That is a process, and you would have to engage the school board to do that. But that's where Stephanie's suggesting there's two options here in terms of fulfilling the condition.
And time and money, just because it's not mine, it's theirs. Time and money, how long does that take to get that easement and everything done? Typically, are we looking months or are we talking years? That's why they said 2 years. I've got to fill these.
So again, through your worship, the survey should be rather easy because again, you're going to be doing that. You can identify early to them that this is something I need to look into. I can't speak for the school board. It's probably not a one-to-one with the local principal. I would start there, but you'd probably have to go to the school board proper to get that. I don't know how long that timeline
Okay, that's fair enough. And that back where they were talking about that roadway that for Albert Street to be extended on, is that a condition that's being put forward here that's part and attached to the severance, or is that whether we were severing the property or not, that easement would go through without us?
So I can speak to that again through your worship. That is an ask or a condition, or we're proposing it as a condition on this application to be fulfilled. We would not be able to get that any other way. It's just good future planning because we own a portion of the new plan of subdivision and Albert Street to the north. So we're looking for just being able to take that road now without having too much impact to yourself or the organization in terms
So
of.
if we didn't sever this property, that wouldn't even be an issue.
We wouldn't be able to ask for it. It would just say it's as it is right now.
Now, just because Dave might ask me, is it possible? I mean, it's a dead end street now, whether it's a dead end street now there, or it's a dead end street at the end of that property. If they were to say the diocese says, no, we don't want to give that up for whatever reason, if they did, does that squash the,
It is a condition on this application. So what you would have to do is come back to council or the committee as it would be to ask for the relief from that condition to be fully removed.
okay, that's fair enough.
Stephanie, is that correct? Just to double check.
Yeah, through the mayor to the CAO. Yes, if there is a condition that cannot be fulfilled or the applicant wishes to amend, there is an opportunity under the Planning Act for an applicant to apply to amend the conditions.
Okay, perfect.
Can I have a question?
Just a second.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yep, that's good. Thank you very much. That's
Okay,
good.
thank you. Just a second. Do we have any written submissions? No? Okay. First for the.
Okay, this may be for Stephanie. Let's say like the Diocese of London parcel that's in question here right now, they own quite a bit of land behind the church. If they were to sever that and sell it, they would then have to provide a roadway from Albert Street straight over to the new subdivision. Is that a question or an answer or whatever?
Stephanie, I can actually pick that up through your worship, Councilman Lynchy. If the diocese wanted to sever the back of the property, a condition would be placed on them that this road needs to be extended and fully serviced. That is not the way that this application is presented to date. You're not severing on the back.
Yep.
We're just looking for the land acquisition for the option as it would be. I would note for the committee's benefit that Albert Street has been fully engineered. It's not been constructed. So this is just part of the piece of good, forward thinking in terms of planning and road conveyance. And that's why staff are making the recommendation to seek this road widening dedication.
So whether that goes, let's say we squash that we say we're not going to sever or whatever, we change that. The way it is now, and then we accept the condition of having that, does the city pay for all the sewer work and everything going through there, or no matter what the decision is, whether we do it later or we do it included in this group?
It typically, through your worship to the applicant, development pays for development. But without having the road, it can't start as it would be, right? Because there would be no service to put the sewers down without the road being there. Again, this is just an option. Where your application as it's been presented, you're not severing off the rear of the lots. If the neighbor to the south, to the west decided to sever off his lots, very similar lot configuration and size, the same condition would apply, but the lands have been acquired. So it would be, he has to pay for the extension of servicing, storm, sanitary, and water. It would, in this situation on either front, it would be considered infill because you wouldn't go above the threshold of 3 lots. But again, it's just trying to be forward thinking and think ahead down the road, whether that be 10, 20, or next year. It all depends.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd ask, is there any comment from the public? We didn't get to that yet. Seeing none. Other questions from council? Councilor Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I'm just a question to Stephanie and to the applicant as well. Presently, it's zoned neighborhood institutional. Is it to be zoned as single family dwelling? Okay,
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes, the applicant has submitted both a severance application and the rezoning application concurrently. So the parcel that is to be retained that contains the church will remain in the institutional zone. However, they have applied to rezone the severed parcel from the institutional zone to the residential first density zone, and that's correct, to recognize the residential use of the house.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council? No other questions? At this time, we do have a recommendation in front of us, and that is that this application would be granted. Moved by Councilor McClinchy, seconded by Councilor Hemming. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you,
Beautiful.
sir.
Thanks very much. Have a great night.
You too. Our next planning issue is notice public meeting to consider application B05-2022 and ZBA-4-2022 located at 35541 Brinsley Road. And Kevin and Rita Lewis, I believe, are here. Yeah, there you go. The masks are, makes it hard to tell who anybody is, doesn't it? Good evening. Okay, Stephanie, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. The purpose and effect of the application for consent is to permit the creation of a 2.26 acre parcel of land to dispose of a residence surplus to a farming operation as a result of farm consolidation. And the purpose and effect of the concurrent zoning bylaw amendment application is to appropriately rezone both the severed and retained parcels created through the consent application. The provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and the North Middlesex official plan generally permit lot creation in agricultural areas to dispose of a dwelling surplus to a farming operation as a result of farm consolidation, subject to criteria. Staff are satisfied that farm consolidation will be achieved and that the residents may be deemed surplus to the needs of a farming operation, which in this instance is Grace Farms Limited. Staff note that the area of the proposed retained lands being in this case is the residential lot, is proposed to be 0.92 hectares or 2.26 acres, remaining consistent with, generally consistent with the maximum lot size permitted in the AG1 zone, as well as the minimum lot size standards. In further review of the sketch provided associated with the application, staff did identify that the existing shed located towards the rear of the property line, maybe I can zoom in a bit, and I'll circle it. So this shed is located 2.43 meters approximately from the rear lot line, if you are facing the property from Brinsley Road over here. And so staff recommend as part of the rezoning application that a deficient rear yard setback of 2.3 meters apply, whereas the minimum setback standard for an accessory building is 3 meters. And generally, all other zoning criteria for the AG1 zone is being met. Notice of the application has been circulated in accordance to the requirements of the Planning Act, and staff received the following comments. Bell Canada has no comments, and Bridge Gas does have service lines running within the area, which may or may not be impacted. Asable Bayfield Conservation Authority noted that the subject lands are not regulated, and therefore they don't have any comments. The North Middlesex Chief Building Official has no objection. The North Middlesex Public Works Department notes that the dwelling located at 35541 Brinsley is currently connected to the municipal water system. Any additional connections would be subject to further levies and dues at the time that it's applied for. A new entrance permit may be required as part of the conditions for the lands to be severed, which in this case is the agricultural lands. The retained and severed lands are assessed to the Earl Lewis Drain, and due to the severance, a drainage reassessment would be required as a condition of the consent application. And at the time of writing the subject report, staff did not receive any comments from the public. So it is recommended that the application be granted subject to conditions which council will have before them. And additionally, that the zoning bylaw amendment application be approved in principle, subject to first and second reading only until such a time that the registered plan has been deposited. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. At this time, the applicant, anything you'd like to add?
We don't really have any questions. We thank you for sending the report, Stephanie. It was very thorough. And we want to thank you very much for guiding us through the application process. This is all very new for us. And thank you for your support as well. We're very pleased with the recommendation.
All right, thank you. Thank you. We have no written submissions on this again. Any provision for public comment? Any comment on this from the public? Seeing none. Council, any questions on this? No questions. We have a recommendation in front of you to have this granted. Moved by Councillor Keogh, seconded by Councillor Nickel. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next application is a notice of public meeting to consider application B4-2022 at 225 Ruskin Street, and it's Ron McClinchy. Good evening. Okay, Stephanie, we're ready. If you can start on this.
Thank you. All right, so the purpose of this report is to provide council with a recommendation regarding the proposal to create a 726 square meter residential infill lot along Ruskin Street from a property known municipally as 225 Ruskin Street, located within the urban settlement area of Park Hill. The lands proposed to be severed contains an accessory building that is to be demolished and is otherwise vacant of any buildings or structures. The lands proposed to be severed are currently unserviced and has an existing access off of Ruskin Street. The retained lands contain a single detached dwelling and a detached garage and are connected to municipal services and do have an existing access off of Ruskin Street. The provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and the North Middlesex official plan generally permit lot creation within settlement areas subject to servicing and compatibility. Staff note that both the lands proposed to be severed and the lands to be retained meet the minimum lot area of 460 square meters and a lot frontage of 15 meters criteria, within the R1 zone. Additionally, the applicant has submitted a sketch which demonstrates that the severed lot is large enough to accommodate a building envelope that maintains the zoning regulations of the R1 zone. It is noted that the existing accessory building on the lands being severed, should the consent be granted, would no longer constitute as an accessory building insofar as the main permitted use, which is residential, has not yet been established. So it is recommended that the accessory building be removed to maintain compliance with the zoning bylaw. Notice of the application has been circulated in accordance to the requirements of the Planning Act, and staff received the following comments. The Asabo Bayfield Conservation Authority stated that the property does not fall in within the regulated limits. Enbridge Gas does have service lines running in the area, which may or may not be impacted. The North Middlesex Public Works Department did note that the property or the current dwelling is connected to municipal services. Any additional access is required or servicing would be subject to municipal review and fees at the time of the application. In regards to drainage, there is insufficient storm sewer outlet fronting the retained or severed properties. Stormwater controls and flows are subject to municipal staff's approval at the engineering stage of this application. And additionally, they have requested that cash in lieu of parkland dedication be submitted in accordance to the North Middlesex fee bylaw. So that is $1,200 for the severed lot. That a lot grading and servicing drawing be submitted, as well as a design brief and memorandum in regards to servicing. The North Middlesex chief building official has also requested a lot grading plan as a condition of the consent application. And at the time of writing the subject reports, no comments have been received from the public. However, subsequent to writing the subject report, staff did receive additional comments from Bell Canada. They did identify, and I believe I can scroll over here. They did identify Bell infrastructure on the lot proposed to be severed. And as a condition, they are requesting that an access easement be applied for. From my understanding, there are underground infrastructure in this general area. And so they are requesting a 3-meter wide easement in favor of Bell as a condition of the application. So it is recommended that the application be granted subject to the conditions before you, and additionally that the following condition be added, that a utility be created to the satisfaction of Bell Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. At this time, applicant, anything you'd like to comment?
Just in the conditions, the lot grading, the existing building there now is to be torn down. I have the demolition permit in my file here. I called Walden, and he said in the conditions to provide lot grading and service drawing stamped by a professional engineer. He said to request possibly waive the engineering aspect of it because it's a level lot with a cement slab and no basement. He says it's going to be very, and cinder block wall. It's going to take ball testing contracting 6 hours and put a load of gravel in, and it's done. So he said, if the building inspector, would that be enough? Or do you need a professional engineer to do the drawings and stamping? But it's so simple. He said if it was a basement on a burned out building, he could understand you needed more provision there. But
Okay,
he was just wondering if we could,
Stephanie? Oh, Arnie, our building official's here. Arnie, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, certainly, through the mayor to council and the applicant. A lot grading plan is really, it's there for the life of the property. And Grading is something that's very important in our communities when yards back onto each other. And whether it's setting the elevation of the top of the foundation, it really establishes an organized development. If a swimming pool is going to be installed in the future, it's something that can constantly be referred to as something that we've approved. It blends in with the community, and it's sort of the standard for that lot that we can all look at. So we strongly recommend a lot grading plan be established for that property.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I'm severing this lot. I'm leveling the lot, severing it and selling it. And the buyer is going to be getting a building permit. So would he not be the person to bring you the plans and the great lot grading and the service drawing then to go with his new buildings? Or do I have to do it and pass it on to the buyer?
Okay, Stephanie has her hand up on that. Stephanie, would you like to
Sure.
comment?
Thank you. Through the mayor to the applicant. So in addition to lot grading, generally the engineering design work is required as a condition of this consent application. And that's in order to demonstrate that the lot is considered to be viable and intended for residential purposes. So it is quite common for residential lot creation to verify that the existing municipal infrastructure can accommodate an additional connection, and the municipality needs to be, we need to ensure that it can be serviced, and to Arnie's point in terms of lot grading, that the stormwater management is also taken into consideration as part of that.
I think if I can, your question though was, do you have paid or can the buyer pay that? Is that correct, what you're asking?
Well, what Phil or Derek Walden was asking was clarification, because the next item was, I have to provide the design brief and memo prepared by a professional engineer to outline the capacity required for the future development. So I have to provide all this before I hand it to the buyer, before he gets a building permit. Is that correct?
Jonathan?
Through your worship to the applicant, that is correct. Through the analysis that was provided under I'm just going to focus on stormwater here. Through the planner's report, it was identified that stormwater is insufficient in the area. So on-site controls in terms of viability of the lot creation is subject to that engineering design. The briefing that staff would be looking for wouldn't be more than a couple pages. It's just really to ensure that pre to post conditions are maintained. And you're on a margin there with the existing building there, but there will be intensification. And we just need to ensure that it's there appropriately.
Okay, that's all good. My only question is now, do I have to bring in Dylan, the engineering company, to do this, or do I do it through the municipality?
Through your worship to the applicant, it would be a third-party review. We are the approval authority. We're not the one who would put that package together. You would have to seek a third-party engineering firm.
Okay.
Thanks.
There's no other written submissions, I don't believe. Any comments from public? Sal, you're the only one back there. Okay. Questions from the committee? Deputy Mayor Canales.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Just to go further than what Mr. McClinchy was arguing there in terms of his responsibilities, can you help me understand the rationale for the seller of a property being responsible for the developer's costs? In this case, particularly with the building and the engineering, because Mr. McClinchy may not even know what kind of structure is going there. So if I would like a better understanding of that.
Arnie, if you would, please.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, or deputy mayor, sorry. This is a standard that we deal with all development. We want to, it's almost a selling point for the property as well. And the developer, or the seller's engineer doesn't have to plot out an exact house. They can just put a box on the property and establish what the top of the foundation should be, and some elevations of the swales and the side yards. So it doesn't have to be a specific house, and they would then pass that information on to the builder, and they likely would use the same engineering firm to plot their actual house on that plan. But typically that is done at the time of development, whether it's in a subdivision or in a lot like this.
Okay, in addition to that, just ahead of the public comments there, there's a recommendation that the owner provide a design brief memorandum prepared by a professional engineer and that future development lot, et cetera. And below that, that the property that be serviced prior to the development of property be serviced prior to stamping of the deed. So service, that would mean sewer connections, water connections, and gas connections?
Through your worship, through the deputy mayor, that servicing in this context is only to the property line. It's not all the way in because there would be a transfer from what Mr. McClinchy is suggesting, that a purchaser would come forward with a plan for a house, a single family residential, and then it would transition over into the building department where those connections would be made. So it's only servicing to the property line, and that's conducive as well and detailed in the brief and on the lot grading plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions from the committee? Oh, go ahead, Ms. McClinchy. We're on.
Clarification on the lot line. You gave me papers from M. Dillon showing the sewers and everything on Ross Keene Street.
Yes.
Is that considered the lot line or is that on Ross Keene Street? Is there a junction or?
Through your worship to the applicant, that was most likely our infrastructure and operations manager. It's another Jonathan. That drawing you would provide to the engineer, and really it's just putting a couple of lines in to make sure that we have the proper separation distance between servicing. It can fit solely contained on the lot, but generally on the lot grading plan, servicing is only showed to the lot line, and then it stops, and then it would transition over to the building department in future.
So does that mean I have to have someone come out and physically dig
Yes,
that over to the lot line?
that would be, well, eventually that will be required. But
Before the hookup?
that would be subject to the building permit, but you need to show it now. So sorry, the actual physical works could be done in future, but they needs to be detailed in the lot grading and the design brief as it would be. So this is an exercise, a paper exercise as it would be right now. The physicality of when it happens and the development charges that would be subject to actually putting the servicing in the ground would be issued upon the building permit.
Right.
So whoever's doing the building, yes. Whoever's actually doing the building on that lot.
So am I responsible for it from the
No.
middle of the road to the lot line then?
Yes,
I'm
so
responsible for that?
who's ever
Fire is responsible for the
So we're not responsible, through your worship to the applicant. Development charges give you the right to access. It is still the responsibility of the applicant or the contractor to actually do the connections. Thereafter, and where we're getting a little confused is that this exercise, the best way of looking at it is you're going to show us what you're going to do. And then in the future, you're going to do what you showed us after we approve the due diligence in terms of the engineering analysis. Okay.
Right. Okay. I just had a general question for Stephanie, I believe, and that is on this easement for Bell. If they go in there and dig, are they responsible to put everything back and to the way it was before they came? Like, do they have to fix the, the property up again after they're done?
To the mayor, I believe my interpretation of Bell's written comments that were received was that the expense for creating the easement would be the responsibility of the applicant to do so. It doesn't go into the detail.
This isn't easy, is it?
No, sorry, I don't think, I'm asking about if they come in and do any work at that easement. If they have to do any digging on that easement, do they have to make the property right again when they're done, like Bell? Maybe, I don't know.
Through your worship to the mayor, generally it has to be a like for like, but it's more of the municipality doesn't get into that negotiation or what that like to like looks like. That is more subject to the applicant or the homeowner and Bell. But generally in speaking, or being in construction and dealing with utilities like this, they do tend to go for a like for like. They'll even sometimes go back and regrass if there's a complaint.
Okay, that's all I was wondering. It wasn't about cost or anything.
No.
It's just if they go in and do some digging, are they responsible to make it back the way it was? That's all.
I can mention at this point, they're asking for that easement there, and we can give them the restaurant mats and the easement, we can award them that easily. But when they do anything, it's on my other lane where it's being retained. Because I have 5 boxes on 225 Ross.
Okay.
So Bell, this is just their formality, I'm sure, because anything they do is going to be on the old lot.
It is a formality. I have a bell easement going through my property as well, but I just wondered if they had to, fix it when they're done. It was just a general question. Any other questions from the committee? I didn't mean to confuse it any with that question. All right, we do have a recommendation in front of us to approve this. Moved by Councillor McClinchy, seconded by Councillor Keough. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we do have one more planning application, and that is a notice of public meeting to consider application B03-2022 located at 34751 Brinsley Road. And Sal, if you'd like to come up, is it Mocha? No, tell me the right way. Mocha? Okay. So, I'm sorry for mispronouncing it.
That's all right.
All right, it looks like we're ready, Stephanie, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. So the purpose and effect of the application is to sever a lot with an area of 1.36 acres from a property known municipally as 34751 Brinsley Road, and it is highlighted in green on your screen in front of you. The lands proposed to be severed contains a portion of a private drain and are otherwise vacant of any buildings and structures. The lands proposed to be severed are currently unserviced and do not have an existing access from Brinsley Road. The lands proposed to be retained contain a single detached dwelling and a portion of a private drain. The subject lands are serviced by a municipal water connection and a private septic system and do have an existing access off of Brinsley Road. The provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and the North Middlesex official plan generally permit lot creation within settlement areas subject to servicing and compatibility. The documents also have a servicing hierarchy and contemplate private services provided the site conditions are suitable. The proposed lots are proposed to be serviced by private septic systems and municipal water. And the applicant has provided a concept plan that does demonstrate that the lot is large enough to accommodate both a dwelling and a septic system on the subject lands. Through the circulation process, staff did receive comments from the Asable Bayfield Conservation Authority, which contained concerns in regards to creating a residential lot within the regulated area. Based on the comments received from the Conservation Authority, staff are of the opinion that the additional information on the private drain, which you can't see very well on your screen, but as you can imagine, it's an extension of the drain across the street, following the area of my cursor. As well as the extent of the regulated area and the ability for the severed lot to accommodate a dwelling and private septic system either outside of the regulated area or in a location to the satisfaction of the ABCA be required prior to making a recommendation. The application was circulated in accordance to the requirements of the Planning Act, and staff received the following comments. The North Middlesex Chief Building Official did note that a service and lot grading plan will be required to the satisfaction of the municipality and the Conservation Authority. And the application would create a residential lot. It would need to be further evaluated in regards to MDS 1 standards, in regards to the livestock in any of the proximity area. Bell Canada does not have any concerns. Enbridge Gas does have service lines running in the area. The North Middlesex Public Works Department did note that the current dwelling on the retained lands does have a municipal water connection, and any future connections would be subject to municipal review at the time, as well as fees. In regards to roads and new entrants, as well as a permit would need to be required to the satisfaction of the municipality. The lands are assessed to the Brinsley Drain, and due to the severance application, a drainage reassessment would have to be completed as a future condition. Cash in lieu of parkland dedication would be required for the severed lot in accordance to the municipality's fee by law, which is $1,200 for the severed lot. A lot grading and servicing drawing be provided, as well as a design brief memorandum. And the Asable Bayfield Conservation Authority did provide the following recommendation. The ABCA has concerns with the severance and proposed residential development. The ABCA has determined that no formal permit for the development is required under the OREG 14706. Prior to approving further development of the area, ABCA recommends that the applicant supply suitable information to confirm that the works on the property have not or will not cause negative drainage impacts to adjacent or upstream properties. In addition, the ABCA recommends that the applicant seek formal permission for the pond which has been created. At the time of writing the subject report, no comments from the public have been received. So it is recommended that the application be deferred in light of ABCA's comments, and that the applicant continue to work with them in regards to any environmental concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Anything at this time you'd like to add?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. When I bought the property in 2019, I was given this this layout here for the regulated area, and it's substantially smaller. They extended the area to what you see in there without any notification of any sort. When I put the application in, I reviewed the documents, and it's been extended to like 80 to 90% of the property now. I was just wondering, I realize that you guys aren't in control of the Asable Bayfield, but that negatively impacts the value of my property, as my house, septic, everything's in the new regulated area now. I don't know if you guys had a copy of this or not.
No.
This was issued 2019. Chief
Yeah.
Building Inspector gave me this the day I met on the property before I bought it. And I bought the property based on this. So I've talked to Asable Bayfield. They won't return any of my emails or phone calls, and won't give me an answer why or when the regulated area has changed. As far as the online pond, there's no pond on my property. I'm not sure where the pond is they're talking about. There is a pond west of my property on Amos's land. And as well as they want information on the drain. The drain was not done in a regulated area. So I'm not sure what information they would want based on that. I definitely understand that North Middlesex would want the information on the drain. But as far as anything else goes, I'm not really sure what their agenda is with this.
Okay. Jonathan, do you want to speak to that?
Through your worship, to the applicant, you are correct. Much of this is in the jurisdiction and authority of the Asable Bayfield. It's unfortunate they're not returning your calls, but that's why Stephanie's recommending deferral, so we can get this figured out.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to see it go any further and you waste more money
Makes
and
complete sense.
find out that it can't be satisfied. In terms of the light of the regulatory area changing from 2019 to 2021, they do change. And that's all I really can offer in terms of what the authority and the jurisdiction for that change. That is even asked, I'm even scratching my head in terms of what notices should be appropriate. The one thing I would note, this is a private drain. We know that through our records as well. And because of that, because of the relationship between private, it's not a municipal drain. So it's actually between you and your homeowners and your neighboring homeowners, and now Asable Bayfield.
What does that mean?
It basically means it's a civil matter. It's servicing private members rather than a municipal drain is classified under regulation by the province, and we can do different things with it. But in this instance, it's a private stormwater conveyance and private stormwater pond. it might be a confusion from them. It's clearly the swim pond's not on your boundary, it's in your neighboring boundary. Maybe it's the clarification they're seeking, but you'll have to have the conversation with them to kind of satisfy that.
So at this point, I mean, I've sent 10, 12 emails, no response. Phone calls, no response. I did talk to her, Megan, once on the phone, and the way she spoke to me, I didn't appreciate. She made it seem like I did something illegal or did something wrong.
Well, so just a comment I'll make
Yep.
too, in defense of Megan, and I don't know what happened. I've had several dealings with Megan. I think I found her pretty professional, so you might have caught her on a bad day or,
she's
or
quite
whatever.
professional, just the way she presented herself, that, you know, I said, you've changed the regulated area. She said, yes. I said, well, my house is in that. And she accused me of not pulling a permit with South Bayfield. I should have called them. I said, I don't think North Middlesex would have approved a building permit if there's a conflicting issue with a regulated area.
I would just keep trying on them and,
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I realize it's two different identities, and I mean, it's South Bayfield, it's for a reason. I
Yes,
understand
yeah.
that, to protect things, but like, I have a picture before I came printed off. This is my backyard. This is not a designated wetland.
I have seen your property.
I
I'm
take
aware
a
of
lot
your
of pride in my
so,
property.
yeah.
I've worked very hard.
Yeah.
Carl Robinson has coached me, and we've done a lot of work there to protect the neighbors out of my own pocket, it being a private drain.
Well, I have to say, you seem like a reasonable person sitting here with us tonight.
Yeah.
So I would keep working with it. In the meantime, Deputy Mayor Canelson, you,
Just thank you, Mayor Rob. I'm actually sit on the board of the Salva Bayfield.
Yeah.
And I did have a discussion with them this morning on another matter similar to yours, but
Okay.
different, okay? And they were very accommodating. What they did is they encouraged to dialogue with them, okay, to negotiate. Okay, although they have recommendations, you know, they do try to work with the applicant to accommodate as best as they can.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd be more than happy to contact them on your behalf if you wish.
That would be amazing. Just my biggest issue is that when I bought this property in 2019, I based buying the property with that regulated area. And now that it's changed, my property
Yes.
devalued immensely, to the point where if we want to go technical, do I call them if I want to do landscaping or?
that's a question you'll
Yeah,
have to
it's
ask him.
it's really
And-
tough, like.
Well, and he did identify that this morning on this other matter I spoke about, that the boundaries were reevaluated and changed somewhat. Okay, and they did that through various methods. And so I think there is room for argument here or
Yep.
discussion.
Yep.
Okay, and I think to be patient
Okay.
and cordial might have more success.
Yep, that sounds good. And for me to go ahead with the severance, knowing that regulated area is still going to be there, I don't want to do the severance, because then
Right.
they basically can tell me if I can do a basement or where my house can go and whatnot. So
It has to work for everyone, right?
sure, yeah, yeah.
And I just want to make a comment. This isn't the municipality reaching out for you. This is the deputy mayor as a representative of Salva Bayfield doing that, just to clarify that it's
Yep.
not the municipality.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Was there other questions? I think Councilor Nicholas, you have your.
No, I was just gonna ask if the deputy mayor could maybe
Okay.
do something, but
Okay. Any other? Okay, anything you'd like to add, sir, at this time?
Yeah, so like I said, and that's something again that I could ask to Salvo Bayfield, why they changed the regulated area.
In my discussion this morning, it was a recommendation from I believe, mapping entity or conservationist in another area that was looking at it. And then it was applied here locally. And so some of these the size of the regulated areas have increased, okay, in light of some of the storms that we've had recently,
Nathan, yes.
okay?
Now, would they come on site to check these areas before they change the regulated areas?
Well, that's what I'm thinking would be your approach is to perhaps encourage them to come and visit and dialogue with you on the
I
location.
sent 2 emails requesting a site meeting with no response. But no, I'm asking, when they did change the regulated area, would they have come on site to assess the area that they're changing?
I'm not sure, I cannot clear on that, but I believe not.
I didn't think so, because there's a house
Mhm.
there now that they weren't aware of.
Okay,
And that's something that I would not go through North Middlesex. I would just go deal directly with.
directly with them.
Okay.
Through your worship, to the applicant, you would want to keep us in the loop though, because obviously your application is dependent on that success. Stephanie would need to know what the condition would be and where you land essentially.
Okay.
And it sounds like you're well versed that essentially you just need to ask, can I put a house here or can someone else put a house here? And if they can answer that question, that's where you can kind of leap off in terms of
Yeah,
negotiation.
and that's the big thing, because ideally, I want to stay in this community. I'm gonna build a house to the north and move there. I want to stay here, so I want to be able to do what I want on that land, I guess I could say. Ideally, I'd like that area retracted, but I mean, that's something that we're gonna.
And that's strictly between. yeah,
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
strictly between us all.
Yep, I think that's, that is it. And then the other thing that was suggested too, I don't know if you would have anything to do with that, the private drain that there is there, I put on the sketch an easement. Does that make sense?
Through your worship to the applicant, I would, again, private drains are dealt differently. If you and your neighbors are all in the same boat, you might just not put an easement on it. If you start putting an easement on there, it has to be registered in terms of the parties that would be involved. And then you're kind of getting into a mutual drain, or you could possibly consider just by the layout and the topography, this might be municipal drain, but I'd say you should be seeking some advice from ABCA in terms of that. That might be a solution to the pond that they're alluding to. But I would hold comment to them to kind of guide you through the process, okay?
Is it a possibility to put a municipal drain in, or is that we've gone way past that?
Through your to the applicant, any homeowner can request a municipal drain or agricultural, but there are certain provisions of 2/3, owning the land or 2/3 of the owners within the watershed area. The other thing you need to be aware of, municipal drains in a residential context are not, lack of a better term, there's no bonus. Agriculturals get rebates on them, so it'd be strictly out of pocket, and you'd be making it to an agricultural threshold. But I would kind of keep that as your third and maybe fourth option if you get
And
to
that's
that
the
point.
direction we took. That property's been there forever. I bought it. I didn't want to cost anyone else in the area money because I decided to change something. So I kind of did everything on my own dime, I guess you would say. So it did impact everyone else, but that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? We do have a recommendation to defer at this time. Moved by Councillor Hemming, seconded by Councillor Moyer. In favor? Carrie, good luck.
Perfect. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you.
And is that my only Stephanie? I would just talk back and forth
Yes, yes,
with
I'll reach
Stephanie?
out to
That's it?
Stephanie.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks, Al. Thank you, Stephanie.
Have a good night.
You too. Right now, we need a motion to that Committee of Adjustment adjourn and public meeting continue in order to consider the building permit fee review. Councillor McClinchy, seconded by Councillor Nickel. All in favor? Carrie. Okay, who's going to begin the building permit?
Through your worship, members of council, for your consideration today is the tabulated results for the change to our building and permits and fees. Glenn Tulloch was the consultant that we seek to undertake this exercise on the behalf of Adelaide Metcalf and the Southwest Middlesex and North Middlesex. Glenn has a large repertoire in the building industry. He's been a building inspector. I think he worked even for the ministry a couple of times and has done many of these studies. So we have a PowerPoint presentation to go through, and I'll talk.
Whenever you're ready, Glenn. Oh, we're just waiting to share the screen?
I think that's probably appropriate. Because I can't see the screen from here. So
You see
first
now,
off,
Glenn?
I'd yes, I can see it now. That works well. So first off, I want to take the opportunity to introduce myself. Certainly to thank Mayor Rupp and members of council for the opportunity to meet with you this evening and to be able to make this presentation. I am a land use planner by profession, and it's interesting the proceedings tonight. I've gone through many like that, so I empathize with the kinds of issues and concerns that you're often faced with as a council. It's sometimes a challenge. I have had the opportunity, as Mr. Graham has pointed out, to undertake these kinds of studies for the last, I guess, almost 20 years since Bill 124 was introduced. And I would like to say, before I get into it, I want to say a sincere thank you to Mr. Graham and staff, and also to Mr. Marsman and his staff for the time and effort putting data collection together that I required in order to move forward with this particular project. The reason for the legislation back in about 2005 was because of the fact that municipalities around about Ontario and more concentrated in the GTA were abusing the system. They were collecting building permit fees and using them for other municipal purposes other than the building inspection service. So the province said, no, that's not the intent, and they changed the legislation. So this legislation has been now around for close to 20 years, but it arose out of that particular concern. Next slide, please. So the mandate that I was given was to review the building permit fee schedule in place for your municipality, to review the permit volumes over a 5-year period to determine if there were any peaks and valleys or trends that were notable. Also to update the fees to reflect the current costs using the 2021 budget. So that means that your fees are right up to date with the costs. And most particularly important is to recommend fees to reflect the scope of services offered using a full cost recovery financial model. And the reason there is that it's very straightforward. It means that the public purse is not going to finance private development. So it's a user pay system in a sense where the person acquiring the building permit pays the full cost of the service. And finally, to assist Ernie with the update to the building bylaw to modernize it to current circumstances. Next slide. So the legislation framework under the Building Code Act under Section 7.2 says that the total fees are not to exceed the anticipated reasonable costs. So it's often difficult to determine the exact cost, but the act does give you some flexibility. And just to give you an example, you're into an election year this year. So when I look at the cost of council as part of the system, I would automatically exclude the election costs. That is to say, the costs of running the municipal election, because they're not reasonable when associated with the building permit fee process. So the anticipated reasonable costs are what we work with. The Section 7.6 requires public notice and a meeting, which is what we're doing this evening, required for a proposed change in fees. Next slide. And the general intent of the legislation, based on just what I said, was to ensure accountability and transparency. By producing a building permit fee report, it gives the development industry and the private sector and municipalities an understanding of how the fees were calculated, how they were developed, and it also assists with the municipality in moving forward based on the content of the report. And as I also said, the intent was to provide full cost recovery of the fees required to cover the costs, the operational and capital costs of the building department. In this case, the Arnie's operation, sorry, and also the related support services, which I will get into in a minute, and to certainly require public disclosure for changes in fees or new fees, because the bylaw that you will be adopting does include some new fees. Next slide. So the methodology was to review the building permit activity for a 5-year period to look at the particular trends, to review the building inspection process in your area, to conduct a time allocation assessment. And what that means is to determine the amount of time it would take a building official to undertake inspections, to review building plans and things of that nature, and also for support staff to conduct their part of the provision of the services. Also to calculate the indirect and direct costs. The indirect costs are those costs for the other municipal departments that support Arnie's operation. And the direct costs are Arnie's direct costs for providing the service to you and utilizing the most recent budget, which is the 2021 municipal budget. And to then calculate building permit fees designed to recover those costs. And finally, to look at certain adjustments, not the least of which is to create a cost stabilization reserve fund. And this is a fund that is put aside for a couple of reasons. One, if you experience, say, an unusual expenditure, not necessarily unusual, an expenditure that's in excess of what you might normally expect. It could be the replacement of a vehicle that's used by the building department for conducting building inspections. It could be the cost of acquiring new computers for the building officials. And also, if you have a situation where you have an ebb and flow of your permit volumes, and you get a situation where your permit volumes are not resulting in cost recovery of your operational costs, that means you can draw from this reserve to offset that sort of a deficit situation. So it has a stabilizing effect, if you wish, on the cost of doing business over, in this case, it could be 5-10 years, as the case may be. Next slide. So the building permit process in your area is very similar to that of most other municipalities in Ontario. The first phase of the process is to receive, is to have an application for a building permit. And kudos to Arnie's operation is all of this has now been electronized, meaning that the submissions are made electronically. You have online applications that can be used. So there's not an excessive amount of time at the outset of the project with pre-consultation or things of that nature. So it's a very efficient, very effective phase one, if you wish, of your particular process. The second phase is the application review. So that's essentially is looking at the building drawings, the building plans, for what is proposed to be built, reviewing them to ensure compliance with the building code itself. Phase 3 is where the permit is issued. Usually that involves collecting some other fees as well as the building permit fee. And the fourth phase, which is the most important phase, is the inspection phase. And why that's most important is that what you're paying for through your building permit fees, assurance. You're paying for the assurance that what you're going to build is in compliance with the code, so it's therefore safe construction, and you should have that confidence that when the building is ready for occupancy, it does meet all of the relevant requirements. So it's safe construction, it's energy efficient construction, and most of the time, quite frankly, in the building permit process is on the inspection phase. Next slide. So the design of the fee structure is based on a couple of components. The step one is to calculate the indirect costs, and those are the costs of administration and enforcement by support staff supporting Arnie's operation. The second step is to calculate the direct costs, which are the costs associated with Arnie's operation. So the two together give you the total cost, and then from there you calculate the permit fees. Next slide. So the indirect costs are essentially the operating and capital costs of all building permit related services that are provided by other municipal departments that support the joint building group services operation. So it's essentially the cost of doing business. And again, what we're looking at here is to try and recover the full cost of doing that business. Next slide. So in your circumstances, the support services are provided first by council. Council is a decision-making body that adopts the building bylaw, and they generally oversee the operation of the municipality, meaning they're responsible for hiring staff and for the proper management of the municipality. The CAO clerk is also in a management position overseeing the operation and ensuring that it runs smoothly. Finances is particularly important because they're responsible for procurement, for the payment of salaries, and certainly for receiving any of the fees, building permit fees, and I guess the other function, which is particularly important with finance, is the actual budgets, the administration of the budget for the building service. And then there's, of course, HR responsible for personnel and the management of personnel. So those are the support services. And what we've done in the next slide is to cost out the provision of those particular services. So as an example, the calculation for the finance officer was to look at the percentage of time that individual spent on building related duties, preparing the budget and collecting fees and procurement of supplies and things of that nature. So the time spent by that individual times the number of hours per year times the salary, benefits, and overhead. So the finance officer was determined to spend about 2% of his time. So 2% times 1,820 hours equal 36.4 hours, which times salary and benefit equated to $2,420.10. And of course, this was aggregated for the three municipalities because we're servicing this generally as one area. So the aggregate expenditure was $72.60.30. Next slide. So here's an example of the calculation for all of the indirect costs. They're totaled here. So the cost of council's involvement in the process is $2,111.61. CAO 16,000 and change, HR 2,600 and change, finance 16,000, and in addition to that, there's the lights, heat, and water that are required for the building, which is used for the administration of the services and building maintenance as well. So the total indirect costs of the support services were calculated at $44,498.42. Next slide. Now the total direct costs, again, Arnie's operation. So the building department salaries and benefits totaled $252,000. And the overhead costs to run the department were an additional $33,000 for a total of $285,000. So the overhead, again, is the cost of acquisition of supplies. It could be training costs. It could be clothing costs that are required, but standard overhead costs that would be normally associated with the operation of a building service or a building department. So the total there, as I said, is $285,000. Next slide. So if you add the $44,498 of the indirect costs with the direct costs, the total is $329,498. So those are the recoverable costs that you're eligible to collect under the building code at that section 7.2 that I mentioned at the outset of the presentation. Next slide. So then the next task was to look at the types of building permits that are issued. And you have standard occupancy groups A, B, C, D, E, F. F is industrial, for example. The occupancy group C is residential. And in addition, there are other types of permits as well, the change of use, demolition permit. There's permits issued for farms, for solid fuel appliances, and other types, alternative alternative measures that may be undertaken for particular unique construction are also a type of permit as well. So we looked at the time allocation that applied to processing building permits for each of those particular occupancy groups or the other types of permits. And then we multiplied that by the hourly rate for salaries and benefits and added the overhead for both the direct and indirect costs, and then derived a per unit cost or a per permit fee cost, which helped us determine what the proposed fee should be for each of the types of permits. So this is an example of the permit fee calculation for one of the most common types of building permits, and that's a single detached dwelling. So in the circumstance we're talking about, a lot of that work is carried out by the building inspector, not so much the CBO, 22 hours on average. And that is fairly comparable across the province. I get variations anywhere from about 18, 19 hours to 25 hours, depending. Sometimes it depends on the experience of the building officials providing the service, but the 22 hours, which is 21.5 rounded, amounts to $1,269.61 of salary. And added to that is the total overhead cost per permit of $90.47. And added to that are the indirect costs I mentioned previously. So if you look at that 44,000 divided by the number of permits, the per permit cost is $122 for the administration. And then there's the legal costs. There are some just having that legal service available for the odd opinion that council might require, total $1.32 per permit. So the base cost for processing a permit for a single detached dwelling is $1,483.40. So if we carry that over to the next table, there are a number of adjustments that were made to that particular fee. I apologize for the font size on this particular table, but this is the table that shows the calculations in coming up with what we're recommending as a building permit fee for each of the categories. So if you look at line 2, which is the area we've been talking about for single detached dwellings, you'll see in column B, so line 2, column B, the $1,483.40 that I talked about. Added to that is what I call a cross subsidy. As many of you councillors are aware, there are many smaller types of permits. We tend to call them minor permits for decks and swimming pools. And the cost of the actual cost of reviewing building plans and conducting inspections can be fairly costly. For example, for a deck, you might be looking at $500 or $600 to actually run through the process from beginning to end. And it's understandable that people would be very reluctant to pay the full cost. So most municipalities across Ontario give the consumer a break by charging less. So they may charge a building permit fee of $200, $300 or something of that sort, which means that the differential between the actual cost has to be picked up somewhere. And the way that I have, or what I've recommended to many municipalities, and it's been accepted, is no, I don't want to go there with that slide yet, please. But what I've suggested is that that differential be assigned to the larger permits. It does increase the cost of the larger permits or the major permits, but it's not an unreasonable cost. So that, in this particular circumstances, increases the cost from $1,483 to $2,083. Now, added to that is what is being proposed here is a 10% surcharge to create that cost stabilization reserve fund. So that adds up to $2,291.74. Now, it can be appreciated, and that's the kind of cost that we would look at for processing a permit for an average single detached dwelling. But as we know, there are homes that are built, residences that are built that are much larger. So if the average size of a dwelling in a municipality is 1,500 square feet, and somebody is proposing a dwelling that's 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, there will be some additional work to review the building plans, to conduct the required inspections and so forth. So in this full cost recovery financial model, provision is made for the levy of additional fees to equate to the actual cost and time, or time and cost of providing the service. So what was being proposed here was to take the $2,291.74 as the base fee, and then for any dwelling over 1,500 square feet in floor area, there would be $1 per square foot. So if it was 2,000 square feet, then it would be 500 times the $1, or essentially another $500. In columns F, G, and H, column F is the average number of permits that have been issued over the last 5 years for various types of occupation categories, whether it's the group C or group F. Column G is the revenue generated by multiplying the number of units on average by the base costs. So for the 38 dwellings, the cost, including the 10% reserve fund, would generate revenues of $86,976. If the 10% was not added, then the revenue generation would be $79,069 and change. So calculations, as you can see from this particular table, there are literally hundreds of calculations in a sense, but this gives a total perspective of what the costs are for doing business, for, as I say, receiving applications, reviewing building plans, conducting inspections, and all the associated administration and legal costs. So they're all built into these particular figures. So if you go down to the very bottom of the table and you look at line 21, the totals, on average, you have about 361 permits that have been issued per year for the last 5 years. And if we look at the revenue generation from what's being proposed here with the 10% reserve fund costs, the revenue generation would be $359,890. And if you did not have the 10% added to that, it would be $333,089. And you may recall that the recoverable costs were in the order of $332,000 or thereabouts. Next slide. So I submitted my report, my draft report to Arnie, and the draft report is the type of report that council does have some flexibility to make some decisions as long as they're not exceeding the building permit fees that are recommended beyond what is reasonable, going back to the reasonable anticipated costs. So what we've done with, for example, to make the administration of the process somewhat easier, if you look across the first row, row 1, assembly occupancies, the recommended fee is $5,475 plus $1.08 per square foot over 10,000. And the recommended fee, the recommended fee was $5,471, but in the draft building bylaw, what we've done is made an adjustment to make it a little easier by rounding the 471 to 475. So you're not running with kind of odd figures here. So the draft building bylaw that Arnie has prepared for you has that particular fee of 5,475. Moving down to 3A, row 3A for a single detached dwelling, the adjustment that was made here was to look at an average dwelling of 2,000 square feet and to levy a surcharge over that particular fee. So the recommendation was 2291, but by adding the other 500 square feet to make 2,000, the fee was adjusted to $2,400 plus $1 per square foot over the 2,000. And that's on the basis of what Arnie has recommended as kind of the average dwelling size in your particular area. That seemed to be fairly reasonable. And for the multiple unit dwelling, the recommendation was $2,295 plus one, and that remained the same. For mobile home, $665 as a flat fee, and so on and so forth. So there was some adjustment made in the draft building bylaw that is different for these kinds of fees. They're not unreasonable. They still meet the criteria of anticipated reasonable costs in the costing of a building permit. Next slide. So here are some of the other additional fee adjustments that have been made. You are an agricultural community. There are a lot of, and that's a significant part of your economic base. So an adjustment is being suggested here from the actual cost of conducting or issuing a building permit for an agricultural building of $1,539.16 to reducing that to $500 plus 35 cents per square foot, as opposed to 48 cents per square foot. So what this effectively does is give the farm community a break, recognizing the importance and significance of their contribution to the local economy of North Middlesex. And $500 flat fee is also recommended for some of the smaller buildings, agricultural buildings, manure storage buildings, grain bins, and things of that nature. Then you look at, no, not quite yet. And you look at some of the other types of permits. As I had mentioned earlier, the cost of some of the accessory buildings, the review of the building permits was fairly significant. What we recommended was $337 for detached garage, shed, boathouse, other accessory building. And that $337 actually includes the 10% surcharge. So that's effectively removed. And to make the administration of the process easier, we've suggested, or what's being recommended to you, is a $300 flat fee for a lot of the smaller types of buildings, but for detached garage, which could be 400, 500, or 600 square feet and involve a fair amount more work for the review of building plans and so forth. We've suggested a fee of $300 plus $1 per square foot for anything over 500 square feet. And again, with the intent of trying to recover a reasonable portion of the costs associated with the processing of a building permit fee for those kinds of structures. So again, recommended fees on the one side, and some adjustment that was made in discussions with Arnie and his staff in order to make the process administratively easy, if you wish, or easier, and also to give certain types of people in your community a bit of a break on building permit fees to encourage development, as to say, agricultural buildings. Next. So the recommendations that we made as a result of our report was to encourage you to establish the cost stabilization reserve fund again, with the intent of covering costs that may come up from time to time that might be a little bit unusual, or to ensure that there was funding available there should your operational and capital costs be greater than the revenues that you might derive in a given year. So we recommended that council adopt the fee structure set out in Table 5, which we went through, and they were adjusted by virtue of our consultation with Arnie's group. One thing that we are suggesting, and this is based on my long experience in working with municipalities across the province on this issue, we're suggesting an annual adjustment. It's not uncommon for, and in fact, Adelaide Metcalf is a very good example. I reviewed their fees back in about 2005, 2006 or something like that. And there hasn't been a significant change in the fees. So when they're suddenly changed 15 years later, you can just understand the public or the optics to the public of, well, why are the fees being raised so significantly all of a sudden? Well, and the reason for that is they haven't been adjusted on an annual basis. So what I've suggested to municipalities is to use the consumer price index as a way of adjusting the fees from year to year. And by doing so, that more or less maintains your fees consistent with the cost of doing business as you move forward. And in that way, you're not going to see a significant jump, 5 years from now or 10 years from now or something of that sort. And finally, the recommendation is that council adopt a new building bylaw, obviously with the new fees built into that bylaw, but also to give Arnie some greater discretion in his operation, in the sense that he would have the authority to issue conditional permits with agreements, which otherwise would require an agreement with council. That can take time. And the intent here is to try and expedite the review and issuance of a permit as quickly as possible, so that you don't deter development in your municipality unnecessarily. So there's that, and there's also the type of delegation to allow Arnie to look at alternative types of construction without having to make amendments or require council to undertake any particular action. So those are the series of recommendations that are being made as a result of the study, and I'm certainly open to any questions that you may have on my presentation. Thank you. I can't hear anybody.
Are we good? I don't know whether this is for Arnie or for the presenter, but my question would be, if an agricultural building of 120 feet wide and 400 feet long, what would the building permit fees be roughly for that?
Go ahead, Arnie.
Yes, through the mayor. So building permit fees would be based entirely on square footage. So 120, I'm sorry, by 400.
Yes.
So that's at about 5,000 square feet, or sorry, 50,000. 120 times 500. You're at 60,000 square feet. So agricultural buildings are $500 a square foot up to 5,000 square feet. And everything above 5,000 would be 35 cents a square feet. So if that's 60,000 square feet, you're at 55,000 square feet at 35 cents, plus that $500. So it'd be about $19,000, $19,750.
Is that what the average rate is, Arnie, for agricultural structures throughout the 3 municipalities that you work with?
Good question through the mayor. I don't have fee structures with us right now for that size of a building. That's sort of a comparator. What we have done, and again, something council can consider, is a stepped increase once you get to large buildings, or a reduced price per square foot when you get to larger buildings. And you see that in our fee bylaw for group A occupancies. And that's once you're at 20,000 square feet, the cost per square foot is cut in half
Okay.
in order to protect those large buildings from not being penalized for being so large. That's something we could consider. And something I'd probably want to take back to Southwest Middlesex, so we're consistent with our fees throughout. But that is something that we've done with large group A to F occupancies, so we don't discourage large development.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions? Thank you very much, Glenn, for your presentation. Appreciate your time, and Arnie, we appreciate that. Right now, we have a recommended motion in front of us, and that is that the building permit fee review.
Sorry, through your worship, these are the recommendations from the report. We've actually rolled this up into the report to council for the building fees and permits update. So these recommendations are just for FYI. They mimic again. What we do need to do is open it for public consideration, although I don't think anybody's here.
No, there's no one here
to do.
But our recommended motion is just that we receive the building permit fee review presentation and report be received, and that public meeting adjourned to regular meeting at this time, 7:37. Councillor Nicol, Councillor Moyer, in favor, carried. So we're back in regular meeting, and we do have 2 department reports, and this is where we'll close our window on this. After these 2 department reports, we're just going to take a couple of minute break. Start with council after we do these department reports before we go into our delegation. So this is our treasurer on our user fees and charges review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the report in front of you, the recommendation from that report is that Council of the Municipality of North Middlesex establishes the fees and charges for Schedule C, entitled Building Department, and Schedule J, titled Planning and Development, as set out in this report. And these are the schedules attached to the user fees and charges bylaw. And that council directs staff to implement future fee adjustments for the building department, Schedule C, based on the Consumer Price Index on an annual basis. So if you will remember, back in December of 2021, a report was brought to council for the review of the total fees and charges for the municipality. At that time, or since then, the presentation you have just heard from Mr. Tunnock did a joint building group review, building fee permit review. And this report is asking for your approval to change the building permit fees as per Schedule C of the building permit bylaw. No, sorry, the user fees and charges bylaw, based on the report you just heard from Mr. Tunnock. And the additional schedule, which is Schedule J, is just a few housekeeping changes that are being recommended, and Jonathan will speak to those.
Through your worship, there are some recommended changes, mainly resolving around planning applications. So just to give you an example, we're requesting certain deposits for securities as it relates to a planning exercise, mainly for site plan control. That's staying around $1,000. Minor variances in temporary use services was $1,000. It's recommended for $500, and that we're holding some securities as it relates to second dwelling units as if they're erected on an area that already has a dwelling unit. So a temporary use agreement, just doing some housekeeping as well. So if there are any questions, Arnie, Estelle, or myself can field them.
Okay, questions from council? I'll just start with just a comment on the reviewing the fees on an annual basis. I think that's a great idea. In the past, we've seen some quite substantial jumps on it. And I agree with that yearly piece. I think is a great way to go.
My apologies, Your Worship. The one other recommendation we should consider is that council directs staff to implement future building permit fees adjustments based on the consumer price index on an annual basis. We kind of do this in the background anyway, so it's just a refresher as it would be year over year that
So
we
you
come
want
back.
that added to the?
It should be added as well. Arnie did reach out to direct us that we did miss that.
Okay. So we're going to add that to the motion as well. Deputy Mayor Canals.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. And looking at the report, Estelle, and what I read was that the only changes are what's highlighted in yellow. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that is specifically for Schedule J,
Right?
the planning and development schedule.
Okay.
The other ones for Schedule C, the first table is what is currently in the user fees and charges bylaw. And the second table are the recommended fee structure presented to you tonight by Mr. Tanak.
So are we then adopting what the recommendations as presented by Mr. Tack?
Through your worship to the deputy mayor, they've actually been refined in consultation with Arnie, and they've gone down a little bit than what was presented from Glenn. The consultant just rolled everything up for the analysis impartial and fair. And then in consultation with our CBO, we found what was most appropriate for us. But they are going up compared to what they were originally.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that, although there was a great deal of information to process and to make a decision in such a short time for me.
It's a lot of information. It's in a very long exercise to go through this in terms of analysis, and it took quite some time to get to this point. But again, it's value added in terms of what is reasonable, what is marketable into our competitor, or I don't want to say competitors, but we're all kind of competing against each other from one municipality to another. And we're coming up to industry standards, but also giving the relief, like in the agricultural area, of recognizing what North Middlesex line share of some of our building permits are right now.
And that's my concern, Jonathan. I can say that, that we are an agriculturally based community. And, the agriculture industry is taking a big hit with all the increased costs in fuel and fertilizer, pesticides, et cetera, et cetera. And, we want to be supportive of our agriculture industry as much as possible and, encouraging them to produce our food. So I don't know if these building permit fees are going to be prohibitive for the industry.
Arnie, would you mind speaking? I know it's kind of putting that lens back again, but it might be worthwhile passing it over to you.
Through the mayor, that's a great question to council. And we've had similar really good questions last week at Southwest Middlesex as well. I think the intent of Glenn Tunnock's report, especially with regards to agricultural buildings, was for cost recovery up to a certain point. And I think it's a good example that you've provided, Councillor, a few minutes ago about a barn that's 120 by 400. At some point, do we want to dial back that rate per square foot at least for large buildings, exceedingly large buildings, so that it's not a big penalty, because we want to be reasonable with our costs. So if council certainly wants to go in that direction, it's something that I think is reasonable, that when you get a farm building, say in excess of 25 or 30,000 square feet, and I can provide the clerk exactly what we do at Middlesex Center following this meeting, to step back our rate per square foot for large farm buildings, so it doesn't stay at that 35 cents a square foot. I think we can probably dial that back down to 17 once they get up to a certain size, so that number was really based on the number of farm buildings that we see. But what wasn't considered is the odd large one that we get. That really, is it taking too much potentially? Yeah, we could dial that back.
Okay,
But we'd like to do that consistently.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that, because I think, as you know, the agriculture industry is getting larger, they're expanding, and the barns are getting bigger, to be more profitable. And I don't know if the building fees would be cost prohibitive for some individuals, because, and I'm thinking that realistically from a practical point of view, whether you inspect, a building that's 12,000 square feet or one that's 50,000 square feet, is there any more time required for that? I don't know.
Yeah, and through the mayor, if I can just to that, there is more time for sure. There's more time spent on it, more expertise. But I think if council wants to come with a size that we want to take to our partners, Adelaide, Metcalfe, and Southwest Middlesex, when we get to a large farm building, say 30,000 square feet, let's reduce that price in half. It's helpful for a building division to be consistent with our service municipalities, but I think that's a reasonable approach.
Thank you.
Did you have a hand up? No? Councilor Deal.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. I guess maybe what I would like to get to is some type of uniform pricing between Southwest, between Middlesex Center and North Middlesex, so that we're all competitive rather than menu pricing per municipality.
Yes, Jonathan.
Through your worship, it might be a little easier as we remove, or we transition in dissolving the joint building committee, which will end up happening because we're going to a contracted service with Middlesex Center. The intent and what has been proposed is the same building permit fee structure for all three of us. It was actually gave us a really good baseline in terms of, because we're all similar in size, but the schedule that's been presented in our fees and charges bylaw being Scheduled C is the same that was adopted in Southwest Middlesex, I believe, last week. And it is going to be going forward to Adelaide Metcalf next week. So we will have all the same structure and fees.
So a broiler barn in Southwest Middlesex will be the same development fee as one in Middlesex Center.
Building permit fee, yes, unless you tell us otherwise.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it is important that we're consistent. I agree. I think that's a great point. Deputy Mayor Canales.
Thank you. I just have one final question. Are we expecting this to be approved this evening for us to endorse this evening, or can it wait for a couple of weeks to process all this
The
information?
recommendation today is to proceed with the update to the schedule to the building permit fees bylaw. So yes, it is for consideration for adoption today.
Would it make a difference if it was delayed for 2 weeks to allow us an opportunity to process all this information?
That certainly, it wouldn't really make a difference per se. Adelaide Metcalf isn't being considered, I believe, until next week anyways. We
Okay.
can certainly defer it. But it's presented for today for full adoption.
Okay. Well, then may I make a recommendation to that effect, Mayor?
That is your option.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Then I would make a recommendation that this matter be deferred for a 2-week period to allow council an opportunity to process the information that was presented this evening.
Is there a seconder for that? Councilor Keough. Discussion on that? No, in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay. Thank you, Arnie, very much.
We have one more report from Arnie.
Yes, yes, I realize that. Okay, so that's been deferred. Our second report is from the building official, from Arnie, for the year end in the fourth quarter for 2021. Arnie, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Rob. So I'm here today also to present to you our year-end building report, and also it provides a fourth quarter summary of what we saw in the fourth quarter of 2021. So I'll slowly walk council through the staff report. In the first section here, in the general discussion, we say that we found an additional 19 dwellings were built in 2021 in North Middlesex, and I'll elaborate on where those dwellings were later on in the report. But yeah, 19 new dwelling units. Services fees for services to Middlesex Center paid from North Middlesex total $83,000, and this year, I guess a year in summary for council, North Middlesex acquired services with Middlesex Center in a service agreement with Luca Midolf, Adelaide Metcalf, and Southwest Middlesex. So your building division actually services 5 municipalities in total, finding a lot of efficiencies along the way. In the tables of the report, table 1 sort of really gives council a summary of the building permits activity in this 5 municipality service agreement, so you know what activities are going on elsewhere. It's just there for council's information. Number of permits, the number of dwelling units created, and the construction value that we're seeing. The second table is a comparator of what North Middlesex has seen for 2021 versus the previous years. The number of permits we've seen, fees collected, and development charges. I think you'll find that 2021 was at least an average year for North Middlesex, a bit above average in some categories. And in table 3, it really summarizes more details specifically of what type of construction we saw. Again, with 19 dwelling units, it was pretty standard with previous years. As you'll find on table 4, table 4 really just shows how many dwelling units we created each year for the past 5 years. And 19 really is a high for 2021 since back in 2018 when you had 30. And what we're seeing, looking in our crystal ball for this year, we think it's going to be a good year, above average for North Middlesex for 2022. So that's good news. And in table 5, just a summary, and I'll continue this as the years go on, where new dwellings are being created. We found 12 new in Park Hill, 3 in Ailsa Craig, 1 in Carlisle, and 3 in rural areas. So it's just an interesting statistic. I think if we start this table 5 here and continue that over the next few years, you'll be able to see where the activity is in North Middlesex. One of our primary goals for this year for all 5 municipalities is bringing up a new building bylaw to council. We hope to have that, if not in the end of the first quarter, in the beginning of the second quarter. The building bylaw, like Glenn Tunnock alluded to, it'll touch on a number of things, including remote inspections, conditional building permits, set fines for people building without permits, a few new tools for building division. So we'll look forward to bringing that to council, likely in April. And that's the report for last year. And if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much, Arnie. Questions from council on the report? Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Arnie, I noticed in the on table 3, the institutional buildings, that was the one in Ailsa Craig that has not moved forward yet. Is that not correct?
Yeah, through the mayor, correct. Institution, yeah, that's 14 million in the fourth quarter. Yeah, that would be that institutional building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No other questions? Thank you very much for your time, Arnie, this evening. You've spent a lot of time with us and we appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening. Just before we go on break, I would like to do the passing of accounts. All right, so then. Oh, we do have a motion for that. Oh, sorry. We do need a mover for the report for the year end and fourth quarter summary be received. Thank you. Councillor McClinchy, Councillor Hamming, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Rather than, we'll give you a chance to finish before we go on break.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. So the report in front of you outlines the municipality's expenses for the period of February 12th to the 24th, 2022, for a total of $629,583.29. Are there any questions?
Questions? Deputy Mayor Nelson.
I do. As I emailed you, Estelle, on the water refund amounts. I don't know if you did you get that email?
No, I did not. When did you send me that?
2 days ago, Johnson? Same day I emailed you. Mondays. Yeah. Okay. Well, I did have a couple of questions because there's a significant water refund on 2 different accounts. And I was just curious if that was a reevaluating of water usage or what the process was for that.
No, through your worship, it was, and I believe it was for $12,100.
Yes, one was.
It is for what happened when the meter reading happened. It misread and the decimal point was at the wrong spot. It was not caught when the billing went out. So it was the resident was overbilled by $12,000.
And then there's another one from not 12,000, I think it was maybe 6,000 or something. It's a similar.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Those are the kind of things that can give you a heart attack when you get your bill, aren't
You
they?
would think.
Boy. Other questions from council on our accounts? No other questions? We need a motion to pay our accounts. Councillor Moyer, Deputy Mayor Ellison, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much,
Thank
Estelle. And we're just going to take a couple of minute break here before we get into our delegation.